Hello, everyone. Welcome back to STATEC Research Seminar Series on Measuring Progress and Well-Being. In case this is your first time, I'm Kelsey O'Connor. I'm one of the organizers. And today we are pleased to have Dr. Sarah Fleche speak about the impacts of teachers on students' non-cognitive skills and well-being. But before we start today's seminar, I want to announce our inaugural workshop. We're extending this series to an in-person event once a year, starting this June 2nd through June 3rd. You can see further details on our website or send us an email. But to provide just a couple of extra notes, it's going to take place over 2 days. We have 2 keynote speakers and a little more than 20 presentations planned, all in plenary. So we opted to have a smaller event without competing parallel sessions in order to maximize interaction between people. So if you're interested in presenting, please submit an abstract by the end of this month. Submissions are welcome from both practitioners and researchers pertaining to quality of life, well-being, social sustainability, and new definitions of progress. Basically just following the type of work that we have in our series already. We will notify authors of accepted papers in March. So back to today's seminar. So Sarah will speak for approximately 40 minutes and then address questions at the end, at which time please raise your virtual hands or post your questions in the chat. During the presentation, please keep your microphones muted. And a last reminder, we are recording the event. You'll be able to find this and past recordings on the website and on our YouTube channel. Now to introduce Dr. Sarah Fleche. Sarah is an applied economist at CNRS Research, and CNRS Research Fellow at the Sorbonne Economic Center, Paris 1 University. She is also an associate researcher at the London School of Economics, Center for Economic Performance, and the French Wellbeing Observatory. Her research lies in the fields of labor, education, and behavioral economics, and has led to new insights into the role of schools on well-being development, mental health, and the determinants of well-being over the life course. You can see some of this recent work in the book, The Origins of Happiness, which she co-authored in 2018. If you've not read it, I can personally recommend it and suggest following up on that. Without further ado, we are pleased to welcome Dr. Sarah Fleche. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kelsey. So thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to present in your seminar series. And today I will present you something on like teacher impact on students' non-cognitive skills and young adult outcome. So I will start with a bit of a broader introduction on why students' non-cognitive skills and why non-cognitive skills matter. And then I will present the paper about teachers and students' non-cognitive skills I'm working on. So first, the question is, why looking at non-cognitive skills? So by non-cognitive skills, we mean, for instance, social skills, self-esteem, perseverance, so skills that are called non-cognitive. And the question is, why is it important to look at children non-cognitive skills? So I will talk about findings that we have in the Origins of Happiness, so a book we have written with Andrew Clark, Richard Layard, Nick Potavi, and George Wald in 2018, where we have information on cohort studies, the British cohort study, where we kind of follow people from birth until here they are age 42. And we actually look at how different adult outcomes, so in particular adult life satisfaction, is predicted by a number of adult outcome, but also child outcome and family characteristics. And so when you regress this life satisfaction on child outcomes, such as their academic achievement, that is here in this graph qualifications, but also characteristics on behaviors, how they behave. Yes?
Sorry, you just referenced a graph, and I noticed that your slides aren't advancing for us. So maybe you've gone full screen and we can't see it.
Okay. Maybe if okay, here, do you see it?
It looks like so we do see why non-cognitive skills. I just got a note from Anthony, maybe you're not sharing the correct screen, the right screen, but also it's not showing us full screen. And so perhaps you have more than one screen, mirrored or extended.
Okay, let me try again. If I
So
do you see the slides or?
So we see it advanced now, but it's not full screen.
Okay. Now if I do this, is it full screen?
Nope, it's the same.
I'm not sure if my audio is working, but rather than making it full screen, there's just a panel on the right, which I think you can shrink by pointing on a little triangle.
That's true too.
And then you just exporting your PDF.
You just scroll. You would just scroll down in that case. That would also work.
We do see the material.
Here, is it? So what's the problem? The problem is that it's small. The slide that you see, they are very small.
There's a side panel along the slide. And initially, however, you were advancing, I think, and we didn't see when you advanced.
Okay.
And now I see your cursor, actually. So and it's above the converter, and then right next to the beta standard error, you can go to the right. There's an arrow there.
Yes.
And there you go. And I think that will work fine. And then you just, you'll have to scroll, I think, instead of, hitting the forward button. Yeah. Oh. Okay. That seems to work fine. Yeah.
That's work. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So we regress life satisfaction on different child outcomes. So qualification. So the highest qualification they have, but also behavior, which is a measure of a summary measure of whether, for instance, the child is fighting with other children, like whether he's likely to cheat, or also whether he has a lot of friends, for instance, and also a summary measure of emotional health. And so when you do that, you see that the strongest childhood predictor of life satisfaction is emotional health. Okay, when you look at the coefficient, the highest coefficient is emotional health compared to qualifications. So this is the first reason why it's important to look at behavior and emotional health. But you can do the same thing, regressing now other outcomes like income, adult income at age 40, qualification, being not unemployed, non-criminality, being partner, or health. And you also look at how these different outcomes are predicted by child outcomes at age 16, like education, but also behavior and emotional health. And again, you see that these non-cognitive skills, like behavior and emotional health, they are quite important to predict a range of outcomes. So you see that they are significantly positively correlated with income, with being not unemployed, but also being partner. And if you look at health there, for instance, emotional health as a child is a very strong predictor of your emotional health as an adult at age 40. So this means that children's non-cognitive skills matter for well-being, but also for a range of adult outcomes. Happy children makes happy adults, but also adults that are more successful in life in different life domains. So then if we think that children's non-cognitive skills matters, then the next question we have asked in this book, The Origins of Happiness, is how to improve these children's non-cognitive skills. And if you think about the different environment that matters during childhood, you have, of course, the family environment. So we've looked at different family characteristics because we have this information using, again, UK cohort studies where we have information on family economics, but also mother and father's mental health, parental involvement, parental separation, stuff like that. And so what we have seen is that in terms of children's non-cognitive skills, what matters a lot is mother mental health, parental involvement, so whether parents play with their children, they spend time with their children, and the absence of parental conflict. So this is one thing. Family, of course, is very important to improve children's non-cognitive skills. But the other things we have looked at is, okay, what about schools? Can schools have an impact on children's non-cognitive skills? And so to do that, we have used the ASPAC data, which is, again, a British cohort study where we actually have information on a lot of family characteristics, but also the schools the children went to. So the primary schools, but also the secondary schools they attended. And so you can compare the effect of parents and the effect of schools and how they predict children non-cognitive skills at age 16. And here are the results. So again, these are the same measure we had before in terms of behavior at age 16 and emotional health at age 16. And you can correlate that with a summary measure of different family characteristics and two other indicators of primary school and secondary school. So these are just dummy variables of which of the schools the children went to. So kind of school fixed effects, primary school fixed effect and secondary school fixed effects. And you see that when you do that, you get a kind of similar coefficient for family background and primary school and secondary school effects. So this seems to suggest that schools are very important for children's non-cognitive skills as much as parents and family backgrounds. The other thing you realize when you look at this result is that even if we look at outcome at age 16, it seems that primary schools are still very important. Like they have the kind of the same effect as secondary school. So of course, there are some limits here. So the first is that here, when we use these school indicators, we capture a lot of things. We capture, of course, the school quality, but it could also be related to peer effects, to neighborhood. And of course, when we compute this summary measure of family characteristics, is based on what we observed in terms of families. So of course, we don't have information on a lot of characters, family characteristics might be omitted. So it could be that the effect is underestimated. So of course we have to be careful, but at least it suggests that school matters as much as parents. So then, if we see that schools are important, the question we might want to ask is then how to build and create school environments that allow to improve students' non-cognitive skills. What matters in the school environments for children's non-cognitive skills? And so if we look at the literature on this question, so first, there is not a lot of things in economics, and one consensus that seems to exist in the education literature is that teachers are one of the most important components of the schooling environment. Teachers seems to matter a lot, at least when you look at test scores. Okay, so the standard approach is to compute a teacher value added measure using test scores, so to see how much children gain in 1 year with a specific teacher in terms of test scores, and then compare teachers based on this teacher value added measure. And usually people find that teachers can have a huge impact on children test scores, and it seems that these teacher effects persist over time. So the question I want to ask is then, what about children's non-cognitive skills? Do we see the same? Do we see that teachers are very important to improve children's non-cognitive skills? And if yes, do these teachers persist over time, and can they explain students' outcomes later on, and also when they become adults? So if you don't have any question on this introduction, I then can start presenting the paper I wanted to present you today about the teacher's impact on student non-cognitive skills and young adult outcome. Yeah. Okay, good. So in this paper, I used the ALSPAC data I presented already. So it's like a birth cohort study in the UK. So children were born between March 1991 and February 1993 in Avon. So it's a locality, a local area in the UK around Bristol and Bath. And so what is very nice with this data set is that children were followed until age 20, 25 actually now. And you have a lot of information on their family characteristics, but you also have information on the primary schools they went to. And in particular, we have information on the teacher in year 3 and year 6 of primary school. So I also have for these children information on their math test scores at different points in time when they were in primary school. So in year 2, 4, 6 of primary school, and later on in year 9 and 11. But I also have information on their non-cognitive skills at different points in time. So year 2, 3, 5, 6, and also 9 and 11. And so their non-cognitive skills are assessed using the strengths and difficulties questionnaire. So I will detail in the next slides what are these different questions. And it allows me to build two summary measures of students' non-cognitive skills, so as before, on emotional health and behavior. And so I can compute measure of teacher value added in terms of students' non-cognitive skills, in addition to what has been done already in the literature in terms of math test scores. So if you look at when I have information on the, for instance, the non-cognitive skills, you see that I have information in year 2 and year 3, which means that I'm able to compute how much students gains between year 2 and year 3 in terms of non-cognitive skills, and see so the effect of the teachers they had in year 3. The same for year 6. I can compute the gain between year 5 and year 6 and see how much students gain with a specific teacher in year 6. So how I measure these non-cognitive skills? So I use the strengths and difficulties questionnaire. That is the questionnaire that have been used a lot already to measure non-cognitive skills. And it's a series of questions, first in terms of emotional health. So you see is the child has many worries, is often unhappy, rather solitary, generally liked by other children. So question around emotional health, but also peer relationship. Another summary measure on behavior, which take into account conduct, but also whether the child is has some issue related to attention or hyperactivity. So whether, for instance, he is restless, overactive, easily distracted, and also whether he often fights with other children, generally obedient. Okay, so we have two summary measures in terms of emotional health and behavior that are measured for children in year, so at different points in time, and so I can see how much teachers impact these two different measures. So to give you an idea about how to compute this teacher value added estimate, so there are different steps. So the first step is first to just estimate how much students gain. So in terms of the different outcomes I'm looking at, so behavior, emotional health, or math test scores between year T and year T minus 1. Controlling for a bunch of students' characteristics, family characteristics, and introducing a teacher indicator in the regression. Then once you have estimated this students' gain, you can average this gain at the teacher year level, okay, which gives you an estimate of the average students' gain for a specific teacher, the specific year, okay, and gives you somehow the teacher value added, so how much students gain with a specific teacher during the year. Now, of course, what is usually done in the literature is that this teacher value added estimate, they may be estimated with noise, in particular for teachers who have a small number of children, or at least teacher for whom you observe a small number of children. Okay, so somehow you want to reduce the impact of these teachers in your estimation, and so you can compute kind of variable that is okay, shrinking estimates towards 0 when they are less reliable. And in particular, so I didn't show you how this is computed, but so it depends on different things, and in particular the number of students that you observe. Okay. Now, here are the results when you compute this teacher value added estimates for the different outcomes. So here I show you the average estimates when I average the effect for year 3 and year 6 at the same time. So you see that, for instance, having a teacher that increased your math test scores in year 3 and year 6 will have an effect of about 0.1 standard deviation, okay? And you can compare this with the effects of teacher in terms of behavior and emotional health, okay? So you see that roughly the effects are kind of close, at least for emotional health and math test scores. Behavior, it's a bit smaller, but still there seems to be some effects of teachers on behavior and emotional health. So the first lesson that we can learn here is that teacher matters as well for children non-cognitive skills, okay? They are able to improve students' behavior and students' emotional health with coefficients that are kind of close to what they do in terms of math test scores. Now, if you look at the correlation between these different measures, you may want to ask, okay, are teachers who are good at improving student math test scores, are they the same teachers who improve students' behavior and emotional health? And actually, the answer is no. You have a very small correlation between teachers' effect in terms of math test scores and teacher effect in terms of non-cognitive skills. So these are different teachers. You have somehow teachers that are good at improving math test scores, and other teachers who are good at improving students' non-cognitive skills. Now, if you also compare the effects separately for year 3 and year 6 teachers, you find kind of similar effects. So somehow, if you have a good teacher at the beginning of primary school, or if you have a good teacher at the end of primary school, it seems to have the same impact on your math test scores and your non-cognitive skills. Now, the next question I'm asking is, okay, if teachers matter for your math test scores and your non-cognitive skills, do these effects persist over time? Or maybe teachers have short-term effect on non-cognitive skills and long-term effect on math test scores? So are there any difference related to the persistence of the effects? So I have information, if you remember, on math test scores and non-cognitive skills in year 9 and 11. So this means when students are in secondary school. So basically they are age 14 and 16. And so I can see how much these outcomes are predicted by the primary school teachers they had, and in particular, if they had a good teacher in terms of math test scores, or a teacher who improved their non-cognitive skills. So if you look, for instance, at the first result here, I regress these math test scores in year 9, so 6 years, somehow 6 year, no, sorry, in year 9 and 11. So depending on when I'm measuring the teacher value added, I am focusing on the T+6 math test scores. And so you see that 6 years later, you still find an effect of math teacher value added. So by 22% of the initial effect. Okay, so you have some decrease, of course, but it's still you still find a persistence. It's still positively correlated, and by 22% 6 years later. Okay, now if you look at 8 years later, of course, the effect is a bit smaller, okay, because it's longer in time, but we still find that teacher who improved students' math test scores in primary school, they still increase math test scores 8 years later by 11% of the initial effect. Now, if you look at non-cognitive skills, you see that, again, you find some persistence that is kind of similar to the persistence you observe for math test scores, okay? You still find a positive effect of teacher value added in non-cognitive skills on non-cognitive skills 6 years later and 8 years later. Now, if you look at this graph, you can also wonder about the cross-skills effects. So whether having, for instance, a teacher who improve your math test scores, does it help in terms of non-cognitive skills later? Okay. Now, if you look at this, so for instance, these two graphs, the non-cognitive skills in 6 years later and 8 years later, and the effect of math teacher value added, you find very small correlation or even a negative correlation, but it's not significant. Okay. So basically, it seems that having a teacher who improve your math test scores has small effects on your non-cognitive skills later on. And similarly, having a teacher who improve your non-cognitive skills doesn't seem to affect students' math test scores 6 years or 8 years later. So very small cross skills effects. Now, I also have information on students' outcome at age 18 and 20. So in particular, whether they graduated at school and whether they went to university. And so I can also regress these outcomes on the quality of the teacher they had in primary school in terms of math test scores and non-cognitive skills. And here, what is interesting is, for instance, if you look at the probability of graduating from high school, you see that you have very similar effects of teacher value added in terms of math test scores and non-cognitive skills. Okay, so having, for instance, so a better teacher in terms of math test scores in primary school will increase your probability of graduating from high school by 3 percentage points. But if you look at the quality of teacher in terms of non-cognitive skills, you find an effect of 2.4 percentage points. So quite close. And same for the university, the probability of going to the university. There is a significant and positive effect of having a teacher who improve your non-cognitive skills in primary school. So very long-lasting effect for teacher value added in math. This we know it from the literature already, but also for teacher non-cognitive skills in terms of educational outcome. Now, I also have other information on students at age 18 and 20. I look at, in particular, whether they are frequent drinkers, whether they drink 2 or 3 times a week. You see here that actually having a teacher who increases students' non-cognitive skills has some effect on this alcohol consumption. It decreases the alcohol consumption by 0.8 percentage point. The probability of smoking by 1.3 percentage points. Living with partner. So here you have to think that students at age 20 who live with a partner, this is kind of somehow a bad outcome. Okay, so you actually it's actually okay to have like a negative effect here. Okay, to see that when you have teachers who increase your math test scores or your non-cognitive skills in primary school, will decrease your probability to live with a partner at age 20. And I can also have information on whether they participate to voluntary work, and you find here positive effects of non-cognitive teacher value added in primary school. So what are the main takeaways? So it seems that teachers can make a big difference to students' non-cognitive skills, in addition to what we know already in terms of test scores. Okay, it seems that the fact that teachers improve students' non-cognitive skills have positive effects in the long term, in particular in their probability of graduating from high school or going to the university. So it seems that it has positive effects in terms of educational outcome. So somehow it's not you could have some people arguing that if teachers spend more time in non-cognitive skills, it will have detrimental effect in terms of test scores. So it doesn't seem to be the case. And we see that actually students' long-term outcomes at age 20 are improved by having a combination of teachers who improve their math test scores, but also their non-cognitive skills. So in terms of policy implication and research implication, we can think that if children's non-cognitive skills are very important and schools can have a huge impact on these non-cognitive skills, perhaps we should make non-cognitive skills improvement an explicit goal of every school. Okay, not only focusing on test scores and improving students' test scores, but also making attention to children's non-cognitive skills, somehow perhaps measuring these non-cognitive skills, or at least taking them into account. Also, in terms of evaluation, policy evaluation, I think we still have to learn a lot about the effect of school on children non-cognitive skills. So here, for instance, I'm looking at teachers, but of course there are a lot of other things that are important and can play a role in the school environment. School size, class size, use of technology, peers effect, teaching practices. So of course we need more and more work on all these other school characteristics to know how they can influence children's non-cognitive skills. And the last thing is, if teachers are important and can improve students' non-cognitive skills, somehow maybe we should train teachers to improve students' non-cognitive skills. And if we want to train them, then we need to understand what there is behind these teacher effects. So in the data, I actually have information on teacher characteristics like gender, experience, stuff like that, and also a bit of information on teaching practices, so what they actually do in the class to improve students' non-cognitive skills. And what seems to what I can see in the data so far is that it seems that teacher characteristics such as teacher experience doesn't seem to be correlated with teacher value added in terms of non-cognitive skills. What seems to matter is actually what the teacher is doing in the class in terms of teaching practices. And in particular, whether you have a group discussion in the class, so teaching practices that are kind of related to more modern teaching practices, I would say, and less vertical teaching practices. So I will perhaps stop here and happy to answer any question you may have.
Thank you, Sarah. That is a nice overview and some rather interesting work. I think that many people have felt that teachers are important, but it's nice to see the evidence. So I'll open it up for questions. Please feel free to raise your hand. Oh, Chris, I see you because your video is on, but otherwise you raise your virtual hands. It's easier for me to spot, and then feel free to write in the chat. Chris, go ahead and you can go first.
Okay, thanks. Sarah, congratulations. I mean, I think this is really one of the most important domains in the whole of well-being research to push knowledge forward on. So I really appreciate this work. Just maybe obvious questions which you may have mentioned and I missed, but these students all have only one teacher per year for all the subjects. And do you plot a scatter plot of individuals' teachers' effectiveness on two different dimensions, the non-cognitive and math?
Yes, so thanks a lot, Chris, for your question. So yes, so in primary school, students have only one teacher. This is why it's also nice to look at primary school, because of course in secondary school it's more difficult to isolate the effect of one single teacher. But yes, this is the case in primary school. And for your second question, yes, so I looked at the correlation between these different measures in terms of math test scores and non-cognitive skills. And actually what you find is a very small correlation. So teachers who improve math test scores are not the same, and they don't improve non-cognitive skills, and teachers who improve non-cognitive skills do not improve math test scores. So somehow there seems that they specialize either in improving math test scores or either in improving non-cognitive skills. And it's actually kind of related to, I think, to teaching practices, what they actually do in the class. So I think we need further work. I know that, Kelsey, you have a paper on teaching practices and children's well-being. And I think we need to know a bit more about, okay, is it because teaching practices to improve non-cognitive skills are not the same as the teaching practices we improve math scores? So yes, this is an open question, yeah.
So I heard you say that the correlation was low. I was just wondering if there's any more, if it was any value looking at a scatter plot. But if it's just a big mass fuzz, then that's the same as just saying a coefficient.
Yeah, you're right. No, sorry, I didn't look at. You mean to look at the distribution, like somehow to yes, no, it's a very good point. So I just looked at the row correlation, but it's a good point. I could also look at the scatter plot and the distribution. Yes.
There may be some teachers who are, well, I don't know what you find, but yeah, there may be interesting distribution. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Relatedly, I understand you have the characteristics of the teachers and you want to look at it more in the future. You can identify those who are good at, one versus the other, math versus non-cognitive skills. Have you done any initial work to suggest, that the characteristics of one group versus the other? I imagine, experience isn't there, but gender could play a role. There's other characteristics, age of the teacher, or also, so I'm just thinking, have you done any initial work there?
Yeah, so I tried a bit. So what I see when I do that, so you take the teacher value added measure and you regress them on the different teacher characteristics. So in terms of age, experience, qualification of the teacher, there is nothing. It doesn't seem to play a role. Gender seems to play a bit of a role. So basically, women are more likely to improve children's non-cognitive skills. So you see somehow positive effects of gender on teacher value added. Now, of course, this question of more generally the relationship between teacher characteristics, teaching practices, and teacher value added, it's very difficult to kind of have a causal effect, okay? Because of course it might depend on the student's characteristics, and you can adapt your teaching practices based on the student's characteristics you have in the class, and also your if you are good at improving math scores on non-cognitive. So it's kind of difficult to say there is a causal effect, but at least we can look at correlation.
Sure. Please feel free, everyone, type in the chat. We have, looks like Chris, you followed up. His grade 9 math teacher was male and used to beat us with a cricket bat. Okay, so we loved him, but he did get fired in the end. Yeah. And it's interesting that you guys still loved him. So maybe there's also some intangible aspects here that are difficult to measure. Okay, so please feel free to raise your hands. I had a question. It's also related to your what's next, which is how do we understand the size of this? So one of those relationships towards the end, I think at the age of 20, the relationship size was about 3%. Mm-hmm. And I'm not as familiar with the education literature as you are. Is 3% comparable to something that we would see from, say, class size or other peer effects, things like that?
It's a good point, and I should know. I don't remember right now. I mean, if you look at paper by Alan Kruger and stuff like that, where they have looked at long-term effect of class size, it's a good point. I think it's kind of similar somehow to a reduction in class size, but I should check. Sorry, I don't have the answer.
It's unfair of me to ask you about things on your what next slide, so I understand.
But it's a very good point. I think I mean to to kind of know how these effects compare with school size and class size. Actually, I have at the end of my slide, I have something on that. So not on the long-term effect, but on the short-term effects. I don't know. You see them? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So what I did is that I just compare this teacher effect that you have in year 3 and year 6, so at age 8 and 11, with the effect of other school characteristics, so school size and class size. And actually, so you see that they are kind of similar or even larger, the teacher effect compared to these characteristics. And the other thing which might be quite surprising is actually class size seems to be positively correlated with emotional health. There is no evidence that at least reducing class size will improve emotional health, at least with the data we have. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Francesco, you were next.
Great. Thanks. Hi. I have basically two questions. The one is just technical. Probably I missed it during the presentation, but I'd be curious to know if you are controlling for background information, such as whether the school is private or public, whether it belongs to a rich or poor neighborhood, this kind of information. Looks like you are.
Yes. So
Okay.
yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to go too much into detail about the estimation, but so yes, I have a lot of control in terms of family characteristics, but also school characteristics, like whether this is private or public school. So school size, also the type of policies the school is implementing in terms of admission, like which students they select, so I control also for family income and family employment and stuff like that. So, but I don't control for neighborhood characteristics because I don't have them actually. So you're right. So this could be problematic because somehow, well, schools are located in some area, so it could be also some area effects.
But it should be captured by the income of the parents,
exactly, yeah.
so it should be fine. Then my second question is a bit more speculative, because I got intrigued by your results that the ability to teach non-cognitive skills hardly coexist with the ability to teach math. And I wonder if you have any idea for why this is the case, or more in general, what does it take to teach non-cognitive skills, and why can't this be taught together with math?
It's a good question. I think I don't know. My feeling is that so I try to understand a bit what was behind this effect. Okay, and so this is why I try to look also at teaching practices, and I know it seems that, for instance, improving students' non-cognitive skill is related to, for instance, having a group discussion in the class. So does it mean that if you spend time doing group discussion in the class, you don't increase students' math test scores when you do that? It's an open question. I don't know, but it seems that at least you specialize in some teaching practices that don't seem to have an effect on math test scores. But what I think there is two things to have in mind. I think there is a short-term correlation. So maybe during the year, if you focus on non-cognitive skills, you won't have any effect on math test scores because you spend time doing stuff that didn't, in the short term, increase math test scores. But I think if you increase students' self-esteem, perseverance, stuff like that, at some point, there is some effect in terms of academic achievement, because this is how I explain the long-term effect in terms of, for instance, high school graduation or university going. It seems that at least in the long term, you have some effect in their academic achievement. Otherwise, I think we wouldn't find this long-term effect.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chris, go for it.
I'm changing my question because I had assumed that you had fixed effects at the school level, and I'm now hearing that I've misinterpreted your results. So when you're looking at a teacher effect, I assume that you're comparing teachers within a school. Now you can't, but I'm not sure why you can't do that. You're comparing them across years, right? So if I have a different teacher each year, can't you just have grade dummies and then a school fixed effect?
So in principle, I could have school fixed effects. The problem is that I observe only a few teachers at the school level. So usually 2 or 3 teachers at the school level. So, and sometimes even 1 teacher, because so I don't have information on all the students and the teacher in the school, because it's only STATEC participants who answer the questionnaire that I'm able to follow. And so this means that, I mean, if I include school fixed effects, somehow it will be completely you'll see correlated with the teacher fixed effect. If I only observe one teacher, for instance, in the school, and I think you would need also to have teachers that are switching schools somehow, and this I can't observe them because somehow they change. In terms of, I don't have a, I don't follow them when they switch school. They kind of change in terms of identifiers, and so I'm not able to see whether they went to another school.
Oh, I see. So just looking at, I mean, students are changing teachers over time, but that's not sufficient to identify. Right. So then one other approach is just ask in terms of magnitudes. If you were to ditch the teacher fixed effects and just look at school fixed effects, are they the same magnitude? Because we can't really tell which is driving it, right?
Yeah, so you're right. So somehow, in some case, the teacher fixed effect and the school fixed effect, they are kind of the same. So I'm not able to disentangle between the two. And so when you did it, you find similar effects for school.
So it's like calculating a school value added. Is that something that people do? It relates back to what you did in the origin of happiness.
Yeah, so there are some studies now. For instance, Kirabo Jackson have a paper on school value added. So yeah, for sure, this is something that you can also look at.
But that's not really, I mean, that's not identified either unless you have students changing schools.
Exactly.
Okay, so then this all needs to be taken with a grain of salt, especially, you know, the lack of correlation between these two types of teachers, for instance, that might all just be neighborhood effects that are not sufficiently controlled for, or something, or school, sorry, or more likely school effects, school emphasis. So.
You mean in terms of like school policy, like what the school emphasize in terms of whether we should improve students' test score or students' non-cognitive skills? Or...
Sure.
Yeah, for sure. It could be related to the school policy and what is the emphasis on whether
you don't think it's, I'm so sorry. You don't think it's driven by sociodemographics through incomplete controls?
So of course, one issue is sorting. What you mean is like student sorting, whether you have like yes. So of course, this is one big issue of this. So I've looked at this actually, to look at whether, for instance, teacher with better value added have specific students or have different students than teacher with lower value added. So I didn't present you the results about that, but yes. So basically, what I find is that once you control for all the characteristics that I have in my regression, so family, income, employment, stuff like that, there is very small sorting remaining in terms of students' characteristics. So it doesn't. So somehow it means that it says that with all the controls that I have, the effects that you have in terms of teachers seems to be somehow causal and is not related to the students' characteristics or student sorting.
I mean, I guess the unconditional variation is interesting there as well, without all the controls. Maybe interesting to know if you take away all of your school level controls, how much difference that makes as well on your if your estimates go up.
Yeah.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Sorry, but I've done a lot of work on education and distribution of responses. So these are 11-point life satisfaction. Oh no, we haven't actually gotten that, right? This is all. Do you have any 10, 11-point subjective responses as part of the emotional health outcomes?
What do you mean by the 11 points?
My question might be quite off base. I'm just wondering if you're using subjective response scales in the outcomes here.
So behavior and emotional health are based on several questions.
Yeah.
Here you go. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so here you have a different question that allows to measure emotional health.
All right. Okay. No, never mind. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot for all your comments.
All right, so other questions. We're approaching the end here, but we still have another moment if people have other questions. I was also just thinking about the last statement about, let's say, the unconditional. So to the extent that parents select schools, rather than the impact of parents is actually partially captured by the schools. So it sounds as though what you had last said is that once you include a bunch of controls, that there's very little sorting left. So do you observe that the parents are selecting or choosing? And it partially depends on the jurisdiction. I'm not very familiar with the UK context, whether or not parents are actually selecting different schools for their students or for their kids, I guess.
So basically, the main policy in the UK is that you go to the.
Oh, my cousin. Oh, did we lose her? Can you still hear me?
I lost her too.
Yeah. Okay. So. Oh. Yeah. So she'll. Oh, we have you back, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah.
internet connection. So yes. So what I was saying is that basically the way you select a school is based on proximity. So they don't have much of opportunities to select the schools. But what I did to look at unconditional sorting, I do a lot of things in the paper. So I try to look at, for instance, you have correlation in terms of value added between the teacher you had in year 3 and the teacher you had in year 6. So basically, if there is an opportunity to select the teacher you have, we should see some positive correlation or something. So I don't find a correlation between the teacher year 3 and year 6 value added. So this is one thing. I also look at whether there are differences in terms of teacher value added based on teacher's experience. So the idea is that perhaps parents have information on the quality of the teacher if the teacher is in the school for a long time, while teachers who just arrived in the school, parents have less information on these teachers, and so I try to see whether there are any difference, and I don't find any difference. So I try to address a bit this, and it seems to be quite reassuring what I have. Yeah.
So I think we have just really, I'll say 2 last questions since we're slightly over time anyway. So one is, it was asked if you could share the slideshow. I think if you send it to me, I can, or I assume it's not stored online. If you send it to me, I can send it out to the participants.
Sure, of course.
Great, thank you. And then we have one question from Tiziana Tamburini. It's in the chat. So she's asking, any feedback on the role of emotional-based teaching during higher school grades, or any research that you know about that at this higher school, at that school age range? In secondary, often teachers lack a specific pedagogical training.
So in terms of, so I know one other paper that I've been looking at the impact of teachers on behavior and emotion, that is by Kirabo Jackson in secondary school, and so there seems to be also a huge effect in terms of behavior and emotional health in secondary school for teachers.
And so in this case, it's not a teaching practice that's specifically emotional based. It's so in that case, we don't necessarily know what the teaching practice is, right? For the Jackson paper. Yeah.
No.
Okay. There has been work on, let's say, well-being curriculum that's been implemented in different contexts, but I'm not actually sure which, Christian Krekel has a paper relatively recently evaluating the program for emotional health, but I don't think that's in the high school context. And I can't remember the name of it right now. You probably know the paper, right?
Yeah, you also have the Healthy Mind project in the UK that has been implemented.
That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. So of course it's related. I mean, it's a curriculum that aims to improve emotional health and behavior at school, but it's taught by so this is a specific curriculum. It's not like during usual classes, but of course it's related. It's if teachers were trained based on that, somehow they could improve students' non-cognitive skill using this curriculum.
Yeah, that's great. So I'd like to say thank you at this point. If you have any last comments for us, you can close us out. Or...
Yeah, well, I just want to say thank you. Thanks a lot for all your comments and for the invitation. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. And thank you, everyone, for attending. We'll post the recording up on YouTube and the website fairly soon.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.